I sat in the hard plastic chair, trying not to fidget as the minutes stretched on. The briefing room felt too small for 8 special operations guys. All of us dressed in standard issue fatigues, but without unit patches or identifying markers. The walls were bare except for a single map of the continental United States. No mission parameters, no target photos, nothing. "Anyone know what this is about?" asked Casey Brooks, the demolitions expert, seated across from me. I shook my head. "Command's playing this one close to the chest." The room fell quiet again. We'd all been pulled from different units with minimal notice, just orders to report to this facility by Oro 800. I checked my watch. Almost 9:30 now, 26 years of service, and I'd never seen a briefing this sparse. Hell, I'd never seen a briefing this late either. My phone buzzed. A text from my son Tyler. "Dad, called the recruiter today. We should talk." I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. Just that morning, I'd signed the divorce papers Linda had sent over. 22 years of marriage ended because I could never tell her the truth about where I went, what I did. Too many classified missions, too many lies by omission. And now Tyler, 20 years old and in his junior year at State, wanted to follow the same path that had destroyed our family. Dante Rodriguez, our communication specialist, leaned forward. "You worked with Crane before, right, Sullivan?" "Twice," I said, pocketing my phone. "Afghanistan and that mess in Yemen. He's by the book. Doesn't say much beyond what you need to know." "Great," muttered Rex Turner from the back corner. At 23, Rex was the youngest on our team and the best sniper I'd ever worked with. Kid reminded me of myself at that age. Eager, patriotic, still believing the system worked. Another need-to-know cluster. The door opened and everyone straightened. General Howard Crane walked in carrying a slim black folder. He wore his usual stone-faced expression, not a hair out of place on his silver-gray military cut. His uniform looked like it had been pressed 5 minutes ago. "Gentlemen," he said, placing the folder on the table. "I'll make this brief. You've been selected for Operation Downward based on your specific skill sets and security clearance levels." He opened the folder and pulled out 8 sealed envelopes. "These contain your individual assignments and equipment requirements. Memorize them, then return them to me before departure." He handed them out without making eye contact with any of us. I took mine, feeling the thin contents. This wasn't normal. Usually, we got comprehensive briefings, intelligence reports, satellite imagery, target information, extraction plans. I opened my envelope and found a single sheet of paper with coordinates in Nevada and a short equipment list that included heavy tactical gear, night vision, and enough ammunition for a small war. "Sir," I said, looking up from the paper. "What's the objective?" Crane's eyes locked onto mine. "You'll be fully briefed on site, Major Sullivan. With respect, sir, that's not standard protocol. My team needs to know what we're walking into. This isn't your team, Major. This is a task force assembled specifically for this operation, and protocol is whatever I say it is." His voice stayed perfectly level, but the message was clear. Wade Phillips, a staff sergeant I'd served with for 8 years, cleared his throat. "Extraction timeline, sir? 24 to 48 hours, depending on mission progress." Mickey Patterson, another unfamiliar face, raised his hand slightly. "Threat assessment?" "To be determined on site," Crane replied, collecting our envelopes. "Wheels up in 30 minutes. Gear's already loaded. Dismissed." He left without another word, leaving us looking at each other. "Well, that was informative," Wade said under his breath as we filed out. Wade had been my anchor through 2 deployments and knew about the divorce. His sandy blonde hair was freshly cut, and the crow's feet around his eyes seemed deeper than I remembered. He had 3 kids back home and a wife who actually got to sleep through the night because she knew where her husband was. 30 minutes later, we climbed aboard an unmarked C-130. No insignias, no markings of any kind, just flat gray paint and a loadmaster who didn't speak to us. The cargo hold had been retrofitted with basic seating, and our gear was secured in the center. The engines roared to life, and I felt the familiar vibration through the metal floor as we taxied and took off. Wade took the seat next to me, checking the straps on his harness. "Hey," he said once we leveled off. "You ever been on an op this thin on details?" I shook my head. "Not once. Even the classified stuff in Syria came with proper briefings." "Something feel off to you?" I looked around at the others. Most had their eyes closed, trying to get some rest before whatever waited for us. Crane sat at the far end reviewing documents. Rex was cleaning his rifle with the focused intensity of youth, probably thinking this was just another mission, another chance to serve his country. Yeah, I admitted, keeping my voice low. The whole thing feels wrong. No mission parameters, no intel, not even a proper team briefing. And Nevada? What the hell are we doing in the middle of the desert? Wade nodded. That equipment list was heavy. Anti-personnel rounds, flashbangs, enough firepower for a small army. Yet no information on who we might be using it against, I added. The flight lasted just under 3 hours. No one spoke much. When we landed, the loadmaster directed us to grab our gear and exit via the rear ramp. The heat hit me like a wall as I stepped onto the tarmac of a small airstrip that looked barely maintained. 2 black suburban SUVs and a military transport truck waited nearby, engines running. No markings on these vehicles either. Load up, Crane called, already walking toward the lead SUV. I threw my duffel into the truck and climbed into the second Suburban with Wade, Dante, and Rex. The windows were tinted so dark I could barely see out as we pulled away from the airstrip. Anyone want to guess where we're headed? Rex asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Based on those coordinates, Dante said. Middle of nowhere, Nevada. Probably some kind of test facility. The drive took almost an hour, mostly on unmarked dirt roads that wound through empty desert. When we finally stopped, I stepped out to see what looked like an abandoned mining operation. Rusted equipment sat around a central building with a faded company logo I didn't recognize. A chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the perimeter, looking much newer than everything else. Crane led us toward what appeared to be the main entrance, where a woman waited by the door. She wore a pristine white lab coat, despite the desert heat. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. As we got closer, I noticed the security badge clipped to her pocket and the thin rectangular glasses perched on her nose. General Crane, she said, with a nod, her eyes moving past him to study each of us with clinical detachment. These are the subjects. I felt my back stiffen at her choice of words. The task force, Crane corrected, though without much emphasis. Dr. Helena Vance, this is the team I selected for Operation Downward. She looked us over again, her expression unchanged. When her gaze reached me, I felt like I was being cataloged rather than greeted. Major Brock Sullivan, she said, though I hadn't introduced myself. Your file indicates extensive experience with unexpected combat scenarios. That's one way to put it, I replied. She didn't smile or acknowledge my response, just turned back to Crane. We should proceed with the briefing. Time is limited. As she turned to lead us inside, I caught Wade's eye. The look on his face confirmed what I was feeling. Whatever waited for us beyond those doors, it wasn't a standard operation. And I had a feeling we weren't selected for our skills alone. I followed Helena down a narrow corridor lined with flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled musty, like the whole place had been sealed off for decades. She walked with purpose, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, not bothering to check if we were keeping up. This way, Major, she said, stopping at a heavy metal door marked with faded yellow and black hazard stripes. She pressed her palm against a scanner mounted on the wall. A green light flashed, and the door slid open with a mechanical groan. Behind it was an industrial elevator, the kind used in mining operations. A steel cage with exposed mechanics. It looked sturdy, but ancient, like something from another era. Everyone in, Helena ordered, holding the gate open. My team exchanged uneasy glances before filing inside. The elevator was cramped with all of us and our gear. I ended up pressed against the back wall, my pack digging into my spine. Helena pulled the gate closed with a metallic clang and pressed a button on the control panel. The elevator lurched downward with enough force to make my stomach drop. How far down are we going? Dante asked, adjusting his grip on his rifle. Helena didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the digital floor indicator above the door. It started at G and quickly moved to negative numbers. 1, 2, 3, and kept going. The descent seemed endless. My ears popped as we dropped. By the time we hit 10, pressure weighed on my chest. The indicator continued. 11, 12, 13. Christ, Wade muttered beside me. How deep does this place go? I watched as we passed. 20, then 30. The temperature was dropping. I could see my breath in the air. The elevator finally stopped at 42. My sinuses felt compressed. and I swallowed hard to equalize the pressure in my ears. The gates slid open. Instead of the rusted mining facility above, a white corridor stretched ahead, lit by recessed lights. The walls looked like polished ceramic, completely clean. "Welcome to Downward," Helena said, stepping out of the elevator. "This way." I motioned for my team to follow, keeping my hand near my sidearm. Something about this place felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet. "This facility doesn't exist on any official records," Helena explained as we walked. "It was established in 1962 after an unexpected discovery during a routine mining operation." "Discovery of what?" I asked. She ignored my question and continued walking, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. "Fewer than 50 government officials know about this place, and they prefer to keep it that way." We approached the first security checkpoint. Helena placed her palm on the scanner, then leaned forward for a retinal scan. A green light blinked and the doors opened. "You'll need clearance too," she said, gesturing to the scanner. One by one, we stepped up to the scanner. When it was my turn, I placed my palm on the cold surface. A red light swept across my hand, then another beam scanned my eye. "Major Brock Sullivan," a computerized voice announced. "Access granted." "Your biometric data was added to the system before your arrival," Helena explained, noticing my surprise. "Standard procedure." We passed through 2 more checkpoints with the same verification process. The corridors between them were white, sterile, and empty, like a hospital stripped of humanity. After the 3rd checkpoint, Helena stopped before a final security door. This one was different, heavier, with reinforced steel and multiple locking mechanisms. "Dr. Pearson will brief you on the situation in Section 12, she said, pressing an intercom button beside the door. A few moments later, the door opened to reveal a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His lab coat was wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and dark circles hung beneath his bloodshot eyes. "Dr. Neil Pearson," Helena introduced him, "head of research for Section 12. Pearson nodded weakly, his hands visibly shaking as he clutched a tablet to his chest. He looked at each of us, his gaze lingering on me. "Major Sullivan?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. He glanced nervously at Helena, then back to me. "We lost contact with the team in Section 12 26 hours ago. All communications, all monitoring systems, everything went dark." "What was the team doing down there?" I asked. Pearson opened his mouth to answer, but Helena cut him off. "That's classified information, Major. Your team is here to locate and extract our personnel, nothing more." Pearson looked away, his jaw tightening. Something was clearly eating at him. "Dr. Pearson will give you the extraction details," Helena said. "I'll be back soon." She turned and walked back the way we came, leaving us alone with a nervous scientist. As soon as Helena was out of earshot, Pearson stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "Major, there are things you need to know," he whispered urgently. "Things they won't tell you." His eyes darted around, as if checking for surveillance. "What kind of things?" I asked quietly. "We're dealing with anomalies that defy scientific explanation," he said, his voice trembling. "The research team, they were studying something we don't understand, something we can't control." "What exactly were they studying?" "I can't. I shouldn't." He glanced nervously down the corridor. "Just know that you're not here because of your tactical skills. You're here because of your psychological profile." "What does that mean?" "They've sent others before you, teams like yours." His hands shook more violently now. "None came back the same. Most didn't come back at all." Before I could press him further, the sound of heels clicking on the hard floor announced Helena's return. Pearson immediately straightened up, clutching his tablet like a shield. "Are you providing our guests with the necessary information, Dr. Pearson?" Helena asked, her tone sharp. "Yes, Dr. Vance," he replied, his voice suddenly formal. "I was just explaining the layout of Section 12. "Good," she turned to me. "Before you proceed, you'll need to arm yourselves appropriately. Follow me." She led us through the security door into a corridor with windows looking into labs. Most were empty, but one contained biological samples in sealed containers. At the end of the corridor was a large room with armory stenciled on the door. Helena pressed her palm against another scanner, and the door slid open. Inside was enough firepower to start a small war. Racks of automatic weapons lined the walls. Cases of ammunition were stacked neatly on shelves, There were grenades, flashbangs, and even what looked like rocket launchers secured in specialized racks. "Take what you need," Helena said. "Dr. Pearson will provide you with tablets containing maps of Section 12 and the last known locations of our personnel." I stared at the arsenal, a cold feeling settling in my gut. This was way more firepower than should be necessary for a simple rescue mission. "What exactly are we walking into?" I asked, turning to face her. "A situation that requires preparation, Major," she replied coolly. "I suggest you prepare thoroughly." Wade moved beside me, examining a rack of rifles. "This is heavy artillery, anti-personnel rounds, incendiary grenades. What the hell kind of rescue mission needs this?" I looked at Pearson, who stood in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. He met my eyes briefly, then looked away, his expression a mixture of guilt and fear. Whatever was waiting for us in Section 12, it wasn't just missing personnel, and whatever Helena wasn't telling us was going to get my team killed if I didn't figure it out fast. "Gear up," I told my team, reaching for a tactical vest. "Full combat load. Whatever's down there, we're going in ready." As I checked a rifle, loading and chambering a round, I caught Pearson watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, he mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry." The elevator descended deeper than before, the digital display showing negative numbers that made my stomach tighten. The temperature dropped as we went down, and I could see Dante's breath misting. "How far down are we going?" Rex asked, adjusting his grip on his weapon. I checked the tablet Pearson had given us. The missing personnel were last tracked at level 78. Wade whistled low. "Christ, that's deep enough to bury secrets that should stay buried." The elevator stopped with a jarring halt. When the doors opened, my training kicked in. Instead of sterile white corridors, we faced a rough-hewn tunnel resembling a natural cave. Uneven rock walls had only a few bare bulbs strung along the ceiling at irregular intervals. "Form up," I said, stepping out first with my rifle raised. "Standard sweep pattern. Rodriguez, you're on point with me. Phillips, take our 6. Everyone stays tight." The air smelled damp with a metallic tang that made my sinuses burn. We moved forward in formation, weapons ready. The tunnel was wide enough for 3 people across, but we kept a staggered line for clear firing lanes. "This doesn't make sense," Dante said quietly, keeping his voice low. "The rest of the facility is modern, but this looks primitive." "Maybe they wanted to preserve whatever they found," I suggested, though the explanation felt hollow, even to me. We continued forward, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The tunnel curved right and sloped downward. I checked the map occasionally to confirm our direction. Only our breathing and shifting gear broke the silence. About 300 meters in, my flashlight caught something dark on the wall. I raised my fist, signaling the team to halt. "Contact?" Wade asked from behind me, his voice barely above a whisper. I moved closer to the wall, my light revealing long, dark red smears. "Blood," I said, running my gloved finger along one streak. It was still tacky. "Recent." Dante crouched down, pointing his light at the floor where more blood had pooled. But next to it was something else, a clear, jelly-like substance that looked almost like thick mucus. "What the hell is that?" Casey asked, leaning in for a closer look. As we watched, the substance seemed to quiver slightly, contracting, and then expanding again like it was breathing. "Don't touch it," I ordered, pulling Dante back by his shoulder. "Whatever it is, it's moving." "That's not possible," Dante said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. "Some kind of chemical reaction, maybe?" I didn't have an answer, but every instinct told me to keep moving. "Stay alert. Whatever happened to the research team might still be here." We pressed on, moving more cautiously now. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger chamber that had clearly been set up as a laboratory, or what remained of one. Tables were overturned, equipment lay shattered across the floor, and papers were scattered everywhere. Some were stuck to the walls and ceiling by the same viscous substance we'd seen earlier. But it was the bodies that made me stop. "Oh God," someone whispered behind me. The researchers, at least I assumed they were researchers from their torn lab coats, were strewn across the room in positions that defied human anatomy. One woman was bent backward at the waist, her spine clearly snapped, with her head twisted completely around and her arms bent at impossible angles. Another body lay half melted into the floor itself, as if the concrete and flesh had somehow fused together. A male researcher had been split open from throat to groin. But his organs weren't simply spilled out. They'd been rearranged, placed in patterns that made no sense. Some looked partially dissolved, others strangely preserved. "What could do this?" Wade asked, his voice tight. I moved to the nearest body, a middle-aged man whose face was frozen in an expression of pure terror. His ID badge was still clipped to what remained of his lab coat. I crouched down, careful to avoid the pool of congealed blood surrounding him, and read the name. "Dr. Dan Wells," I said. His eyes were open wide, bloodshot and bulging, like he'd seen something beyond comprehension in his final moments. "Major," Dante called from across the room. "You need to see this." I joined him at a computer terminal that was somehow still functioning, its screen flickering with static. Dante tapped a few keys, and a video file began to play. The footage showed the same lab, but intact, with researchers working calmly at their stations. The timestamp indicated it was from 27 hours ago. "Look at the corner," Dante pointed. In the background of the video, one of the researchers was examining something in a sealed container. The camera angle made it difficult to see clearly, but whatever was inside seemed to pulse and shift, pressing against the glass walls. The video abruptly cut to static. "Try to download whatever data you can," I told Dante. "We need to understand what they were working on." As Dante worked on the computer, I signaled to the others to secure the perimeter. The laboratory had 3 exits, the tunnel we'd come through, and 2 doorways leading deeper into the complex. "Phillips, take Brooks and check that left passage," I ordered. "Turner, you and Patterson take the right. Stay in radio contact and don't go further than 50 meters. If you see anything at all, fall back immediately." They moved out in pairs while I stayed with Dante. The room felt colder than the tunnel, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. "Major," Dante called, his voice tight. "I found something. Project files." I looked over his shoulder at the screen. "What are we dealing with?" "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Most of it's encrypted, but there are references to something they called the specimen. They brought it up from even deeper in the mine shaft." He scrolled through more files. "There's mention of unprecedented cellular plasticity and non-Euclidean properties." In English, Rodriguez. "Whatever they found can change its shape, and it doesn't. It doesn't follow normal physical laws." Before I could process that, Wade's voice crackled over the radio. "Major, we found more bodies. Security personnel." "On my way," I replied. "Rodriguez, keep digging." I followed the left passage and found Wade and Casey about 30 meters in. The scene was similar to the lab, violent and chaotic. 4 bodies in tactical gear similar to ours lay sprawled across the floor. Their weapons were beside them, unfired. I knelt beside one of the guards, examining his rifle. "Full magazine, safety off." He was ready to fire, but never got the chance. "Same here," Casey confirmed, checking another body. Whatever hit them, it was fast. I studied the scene, trying to make sense of it. The guards were positioned in a defensive formation, backs to each other, covering all angles of approach. They'd been prepared for an attack. "They knew something was coming," I said. "They set up a proper defense, but it didn't matter." Wade pointed to the walls where more of the viscous substance was spread in thin layers. It came from all directions at once. My radio crackled. "Major," Rex's voice was strained. "We found something. You need to see this." "Position?" "Right corridor, about 40 meters in. There's a door, a big one." "Hold position. We're coming to you." I signaled to Wade and Casey, and we backtracked to the lab where Dante was still working at the terminal. "Anything else?" I asked him. He looked up, his face pale. They were studying how it reacts to different stimuli. The last entry mentions an unexpected response to sonic testing. Meaning? They used sound waves on it, and it didn't like it. I nodded, filing that information away. "Pack up what you can. We're moving to Turner's position." We headed down the right corridor. The passage narrowed, forcing us to duck as the ceiling lowered. The metallic smell grew stronger, making my eyes water. We found Rex and Mickey waiting for us, both looking shaken. Beyond them, the corridor opened into another chamber, and I could see what had rattled them. The chamber was circular, about 50 feet across, with a high domed ceiling. The walls were lined with more modern equipment, monitors, sensors, and what looked like heavy-duty containment units. But it was what stood at the center that drew my attention. A glass cylinder, 10 feet tall and 6 feet wide, stood on a raised platform. It was cracked open, The glass shattered outward, as if something had broken free from inside. The same viscous substance we'd seen throughout the complex coated the inside of the cylinder, and it spilled onto the floor around it. They were keeping something in there, Mickey said unnecessarily. I approached cautiously, examining the broken container. The glass was at least 4 inches thick, reinforced with metal bands. Whatever had been inside was strong. "Look at this," Casey called from a monitoring station. He pointed to a screen that displayed vital signs: heartbeat, respiration, brain activity, all flatlined now. "They were monitoring it like a patient," I said. "Or a test subject," Wade added grimly. I turned in a slow circle, taking in the entire chamber. More bodies here, researchers and guards alike, all twisted and broken in the same impossible ways we'd seen before. Whatever had been in that cylinder had killed everyone. And then what? Where had it gone? The answer came in the form of a trail of the viscous substance leading from the broken cylinder to a doorway on the far side of the chamber, a doorway that led deeper into the complex. "Major," Dante said quietly, checking his tablet. "According to the facility map, that leads to Section 12. Section 12. The section we've been sent to investigate. The section where the previous team had disappeared." I made my decision. "We follow it, but we stay tight. Weapons hot. Whatever this thing is, it's dangerous, and it's loose." As we approached the doorway, I couldn't shake the feeling we were walking into a trap. But we had a job to do: find the missing personnel and figure out what happened here. I just hoped we wouldn't end up like the others, dead in this underground nightmare. I followed the tablet's directions down the corridor with the team behind me. The passageway narrowed again, walls changing from ceramic back to rough stone. Grit from the ceiling crunched under my boots. "Should be just ahead," I said, checking the tablet's blue-lit display. The map showed our position as a cluster of dots approaching what looked like a large circular area. The passage opened up, and we all stopped dead in our tracks. "Holy shit," Wade whispered from behind me. In front of us stood a door unlike anything I'd ever seen. It towered at least 30 feet high, perfectly circular, and made of some kind of metal I couldn't identify. But the surface wasn't static. Symbols and patterns shifted across it like oil on water, rearranging themselves in complex formations that hurt my eyes if I tried to follow them. "What the hell is this?" I asked, stepping closer. "This doesn't look like anything built in the 60s. Dante moved up beside me, his face bathed in the strange light coming off the door's surface. "This isn't from the 60s, Major. This isn't from this century. Maybe not even this millennium." The metal shifted colors as we moved. Blues, purples, greens. Unlike anything I'd seen before. I reached out, not touching it, but feeling a strange vibration in the air. "You feel that?" I asked. Wade nodded. "Like standing next to a massive speaker, playing a tone too low to hear." I checked the tablet again, comparing the schematics with what we were seeing. According to this, the missing personnel should be beyond this point. "You're telling me they went through that?" Rex asked, his voice tight. "That's what the data says." I gestured toward a modern control panel built into the rock wall beside the ancient door, the only piece of recognizable technology in sight. "Rodriguez, see if you can interface with that." Dante pulled a cable from his pack and connected our tablet to the control panel. The screen flickered, lines of code racing across it. "I've got something," he said. "Looks like they installed this interface to control whatever mechanism opens this thing. Basic security protocols, nothing special." "Can you open it?" I asked. "Already done," he replied, tapping a final command. The chamber rumbled as the massive door slid sideways into the wall. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling as ancient mechanisms ground behind us. As the door opened, it released a smell, metallic and putrid, like rotting meat mixed with copper. "Masks on," I ordered, pulling mine up over my nose and mouth. The others quickly did the same. Beyond the door stretched darkness, so complete it swallowed our flashlight beams. The light penetrated only a few feet before fading. "Night vision," I commanded, flipping down my goggles. The others followed suit, but even with the enhanced visibility, we could only see about 20 feet into the chamber. Wade raised his rifle, peering through his thermal scope. "I've got movement ahead," he said quietly. "Can't make out what I'm seeing. Heat signatures, but they're wrong, not reading like human bodies." "Wrong how?" I asked. "Temperatures all over the place. Some spots burning hot, others cold as ice, all in the same, whatever they are." He adjusted something on his scope. Can't get a clear picture. I took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang even through my mask. Form up. I'll take point. Phillips and Brooks on my flanks. Rodriguez, Turner, and Patterson in the second line. Brooks, cover our 6. Cover. Weapons hot, safety's off. We moved forward as a unit, crossing the threshold into the darkness. The floor beneath our boots changed from stone to something that felt slightly yielding, like walking on hard rubber. Lights up, I ordered, and we all switched on the tactical lights mounted to our weapons, creating a cone of visibility ahead of us. What they revealed made me stop breathing for a moment. The chamber was vast, so large our lights couldn't reach the ceiling or far walls. The floor was covered with bodies. Some were clearly human, researchers in lab coats and security personnel in tactical gear lying motionless in pools of congealed blood. But interspersed among them were other things. "What the fuck are those?" Casey whispered behind me. I had no answer. The creatures, if you could call them that, looked like nothing I'd ever seen or even imagined. Some appeared vaguely humanoid, but with proportions all wrong. Limbs too long or too numerous, torsos twisted and misshapen. Others defied description entirely. Masses of tissue that seemed to flow and connect in ways that made no anatomical sense, with openings that might have been mouths, or might have been something else entirely. All were dead, or at least motionless. Some looked like they'd been torn apart from the inside out, their remains spread across the floor in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. "Major," Wade said, his voice tight with controlled fear. "I don't think we're dealing with humans here." I swept my light across the carnage, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "No shit. I mean the ones who did this," he clarified. "Whatever killed these people and these things, I don't think it was human." "Check for survivors," I ordered, trying to keep my voice steady. "But stay alert. Whatever did this could still be here." We moved deeper into the chamber, our lights revealing more patches of the darkness ahead. Each step took us further from anything familiar, anything that made sense. And with each step, I became more certain we weren't alone. The attack came without warning. I watched in horror as something dark and fluid emerged from the wall next to Casey. It looked like black oil, but moved with purpose, stretching out and wrapping around his arm. "What the?" Casey's words cut off as he was yanked toward the wall. "Brooks!" I lunged forward, grabbing for his free hand, but my fingers closed on empty air. The substance pulled him into what looked like solid rock. His body shouldn't have been able to pass through it, but the wall rippled like water where they made contact. His scream echoed through the chamber, then stopped with sickening suddenness as his body disappeared completely into the stone. "Open fire!" I shouted, raising my weapon and unloading rounds into the spot where Casey had vanished. The team reacted instantly. The chamber filled with a deafening roar of automatic weapons as we all fired at the wall. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness, in strobing bursts, but the bullets had no effect. They either flattened against the surface or disappeared into it with no visible damage. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" I yelled when it became clear we were wasting ammunition. The wall looked unchanged, just a slight ripple across its surface, like water settling after a stone's throw. Wade moved up beside me, his face pale in the beam of my tactical light. "Brock, what the hell was that?" "Fall back," I ordered, backing away from the wall. "Everyone move to the exit, now!" The team began to retreat, weapons still trained on the walls around us. Dante was frantically checking his tablet, trying to find the quickest route back to the door. "Major!" Rex's voice cracked with panic. I looked up just as something descended from the ceiling. Multiple dark tentacles, the same oily substance that had taken Casey, stretched down toward us. Before anyone could react, they wrapped around Rex's torso and lifted him off the ground. "Turner!" I fired upward, trying to sever the tentacles, but my bullets passed through them without effect. Rex screamed, firing his weapon wildly as he was pulled upward. His body suddenly bent at an impossible angle, and I heard the wet crack of his spine snapping. The tentacles tightened, pulling in different directions. His screams turned to a gurgling sound as his body was torn apart, blood and tissue raining down on us. "Move! Move!" I shouted, pushing Wade toward the exit. Panic took over. The team fired at shadows that moved too fast to track, darting along walls and ceiling. The darkness seemed alive around us, shifting and flowing like it had a mind of its own. "Major!" Mickey's voice sounded wrong, strained. I turned to see him standing rigid, his eyes wide with terror. His skin began to bubble and shift like something was moving underneath it. "Patterson, what's happening?" I started toward him, but Wade grabbed my arm. "Brock, don't!" Mickey opened his mouth to speak, but only a choking sound came out. His face contorted in pain as the skin across his forehead stretched and split. Blood poured down his face as his head cracked open from the inside, something dark and writhing pushing out through the wound. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. "Go! Everyone, go!" Only 3 of us remained now, me, Wade, and Dante. We ran toward the exit, our boots pounding against the strange floor. The map on Dante's tablet showed the ancient door wasn't far, maybe 200 meters through the winding passage. "We're almost there," Dante shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls. I glanced back and saw we were being followed, not by footsteps, but by a flowing darkness that moved along the walls and ceiling like a liquid shadow. We reached the doorway with Dante right behind me. My lungs burned from sprinting through the winding passage, but the sight of that partially open ancient door gave me a surge of desperate energy. "Almost there," I shouted, pushing myself harder. The slithering sounds behind us grew louder as we neared the exit. Dante was just steps from safety when something dropped from the ceiling. It happened so fast I barely registered the movement. One moment, Dante was crossing the threshold. The next, a dark mass dropped onto him from above. The substance, the same oil-like material we'd seen before, wrapped around his body like a living shroud. "Rodriguez!" I lunged forward, but Wade grabbed my arm. "Don't," he warned, his grip like iron. Dante didn't even have time to scream. His body compressed inward, folding in ways that human anatomy shouldn't allow. Bones snapped with wet crunching sounds as his form collapsed in on itself. Blood sprayed across the doorway in a fine mist, coating my face and chest protector. I staggered backward, wiping at my eyes. "Fuck! Fuck!" Wade yanked me toward the control panel next to the door. "Close it, now!" My hands were slippery with Dante's blood as I slammed them against the panel. The ancient door began to slide from its recess, moving with agonizing slowness. Through the narrowing gap, I saw movement in the darkness beyond. Not random or chaotic, but organized. A massive shape was forming in the shadows, countless smaller parts flowing together like schools of fish. It shifted between states, sometimes liquid, sometimes gas, sometimes something else entirely. The entity expanded toward the door, reaching for us with appendages that defied description. "It's coming through," Wade shouted, raising his rifle. I grabbed his shoulder. "Don't waste ammo, just run." The door finally sealed with a heavy metallic thud that reverberated through the floor. We didn't wait to see if it would hold. We turned and ran back through the facility, retracing our steps through the laboratory chambers where we'd found the first bodies. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. The researchers' bodies we'd passed earlier looked even more grotesque in the crimson glow, twisted reminders of what awaited us if we didn't get out. "What the hell was that thing?" Wade gasped as we ran. "I don't know," I said, checking corners as we moved. "But I think we just found what killed everyone down here." We passed through the room with the shattered glass cylinder, splashing through puddles of the viscous substance. The monitoring equipment still displayed flatline vital signs, a mockery of the life that had been contained there. "Almost to the elevator," I said, checking the map on my tablet. Just as I said it, I heard the sound of tearing and scraping metal behind us. I turned to see a section of the wall bulging outward, the metal and concrete bending like rubber. "Move!" I shouted, pushing Wade ahead of me. We sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of breaking metal and crumbling concrete following us. I risked a glance back and saw the wall rupture, and the same black substance pouring through like oil under pressure. Wade was a few steps ahead of me when he suddenly jerked to a stop. His body went rigid, his arms splaying outward. "Wade!" I called, slowing my pace. He didn't answer. His body lifted several inches off the ground, suspended by some invisible force. Then with violent speed, he was yanked backward past me. His rifle clattered to the floor as he was dragged away, his fingers clawing desperately at the concrete, leaving deep scratches in their wake. His face was a mask of terror as he struggled against whatever had him. That's when I saw his eyes. Blood was seeping from them like tears, running down his cheeks in dark rivulets. "Run!" Wade screamed, his voice breaking. "Brock, run!" I stood frozen, watching as more blood began to pour from his nose, his ears, the corners of his mouth. His skin stretched and distorted, bulging in places as if something was moving underneath. "Go," he managed one final time before his entire body seemed to collapse inward. There was a wet implosion as Wade's form compressed into a ball of blood and tissue no bigger than a basketball. The sound was like a watermelon being crushed, followed by a splash as what remained of him hit the floor. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. Wade, my friend for 8 years, the only person who really knew what my divorce had cost me, gone in seconds, just like the others. I turned and ran. The corridor stretched ahead, marked with emergency exit signs pointing toward the elevator. I sprinted past blood-streaked walls, my boots slipping on wet floors. I could hear wet slithering noises from the ceiling, grinding metal from the walls, and bubbling sounds from the floor vents. The thing wasn't confined to one form or path. It moved through the facility like it owned the place. I rounded a corner and saw the elevator at the end of the hall, its indicator light still glowing. Just 50 more feet, 40, 30, something massive shifted behind the walls, bending the metal panels outward. I pushed harder, my legs burning. 20 feet, 10. I slammed into the elevator call button with my palm, hammering it repeatedly. Come on! Come on! The grinding noise grew louder behind me. I turned to see the corridor walls bulging inward, the ceiling panels dropping as something pressed against them from above. Open! God damn it! I shouted, hitting the button again. The elevator dinged, the sound absurdly normal in this nightmare. The doors began to slide open with mechanical precision. 5 feet away, a black tendril shot up from the floor, twisting in the air like a striking snake. I dove into the elevator before the doors were fully open, rolling across the floor and slamming into the back wall. Frantically, I jabbed at the control panel, hitting the button for the surface level and the door close button simultaneously. The doors began to slide shut as more tendrils emerged from the floor of the corridor. They whipped toward the elevator, growing longer with impossible speed. Close, 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 I screamed, pressing my back against the elevator wall. The doors sealed just as the first tendril reached them, cutting it off. Black fluid sprayed across the inside of the elevator, hissing where it hit the metal. The elevator began to ascend, the digital display showing negative numbers counting upward as I left the horror below. I slid down to the floor, my legs finally giving out, and watched those numbers tick by, praying they'd keep moving. I fought for each breath as the elevator climbed upward, the digital numbers ticking higher on the display. 78, 77, 76. Each floor brought me closer to the surface and further from the nightmare below. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dante's blood had dried on my face and chest protector, flaking off whenever I moved. The image of Wade's body collapsing inward played on repeat in my mind. I'd seen men die before, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in a dozen other places where politicians sent soldiers to clean up their messes. But this was different. This was personal. Wade had known about Linda, about the divorce papers I'd signed that morning. He'd been there through my worst missions, my darkest moments. And now he was gone, crushed like an insect by something that shouldn't exist. I leaned against the elevator wall, my rifle hanging loose in my grip. The black tendril that had been cut off by the closing doors had left a puddle of dark fluid that continued to bubble and hiss as it ate into the metal floor. I kept my boots well away from it. 10, 9, 8. What the hell was that thing? Not human, not animal. Something else entirely. Something ancient that had been waiting behind that door for God knew how long. And we'd been sent to feed it, like cattle to slaughter. Tyler's face flashed through my mind. My son, barely 20, ready to throw his life away for the same flag that had just cost me my entire team. The same government that had lied to me for 26 years, that had turned my service into a joke, my loyalty into a weapon against my own people. The elevator slowed as it approached ground level. I tightened my grip on my rifle and stood up straight, not knowing what waited for me when those doors opened. The digital display finally showed 0, and with a soft chime, the doors slid apart. Helena Vance stood in the corridor, flanked by 6 men in tactical gear with weapons at the ready. Her face showed no surprise at my appearance, blood-spattered, alone, the only one returning from a team of 8. "Major Sullivan," she said, her voice as cool and clinical as when she'd first greeted us. "Congratulations on surviving the test." I stared at her, the words not making sense at first. Test? My team was dead. Casey, Rex, Mickey, Dante, Wade, all torn apart, consumed by something that defied explanation. "Where's the rest of your team, Major?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "Dead," I said, my voice cracking. They're all dead. She nodded slightly, as if confirming data on a spreadsheet. That's unfortunate, but not unexpected. The security team kept their weapons trained on me as I stepped out of the elevator. One of them moved forward to take my rifle, but I tightened my grip. "What do you mean, test?" I asked, my voice steadier now, anger building beneath the shock. "What the hell was that thing? And why did you send us down there?" Helena adjusted her glasses, looking at me like I was a lab specimen. "The entity, as we classify it, has been contained in that chamber since the facility was established. We've been studying its capabilities and limitations. Your team provided valuable data on its response to armed military personnel." The implications hit me like a physical blow. You knew what was down there. You sent us in as, what, bait? "Test subjects," she corrected. "Previous civilian teams yielded limited data. We needed to observe the entity's behavior against trained combatants." My vision went red. Wade, Dante, Casey, Rex, Mickey, all dead because this woman wanted to collect data. I lunged forward, dropping my rifle and reaching for Helena's throat. "You killed them! You murdered my team!" I never reached her. 2 security guards grabbed my arms, wrenching them behind my back with practiced efficiency. A third drove his knee into the back of my leg, forcing me to the ground. My cheek pressed against the cold floor as they secured my wrists with zip ties. "Major Sullivan, control yourself," Helena said, looking down at me. "Your reaction is unnecessary." The mission was approved at the highest levels. I struggled against the restraints, earning only a tighter grip from the guards. "You sent us down there to die." "Not all of you, clearly," she replied, gesturing to one of the guards. "Take Major Sullivan to debriefing room 3. General Crane will want to speak with him." The guards hauled me to my feet. One of them collected my rifle, while the others marched me down the corridor. I caught one last glimpse of Helena making notes on a tablet, probably recording my emotional response for her data. They led me through a series of hallways I hadn't seen before, away from the main research area. No one spoke. My mind raced with questions, with rage, with the fresh memory of watching my team die one by one. After several minutes, we reached a door marked DR3. One guard swiped a key card and they pushed me inside. The debriefing room was small and sterile. White walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and 2 chairs. A camera in the corner tracked my movement. The guards cut the zip ties, pushed me into one of the chairs, and left without a word. The door locked behind them with an audible click. I sat alone for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a cold, focused anger. I examined the room for anything I could use, any way out, but found nothing. When the door finally opened again, General Howard Crane walked in. The image of Wade's body, collapsing inward, played on repeat in my mind. I'd seen men die before, in Afghanistan, in Syria, and a dozen other places where politicians sent soldiers to clean up their messes. But this was different. This was personal. Wade had known about Linda, about the divorce papers I'd signed that morning. He'd been there through my worst missions, my darkest moments. And now he was gone, crushed like an insect by something that shouldn't exist. I leaned against the elevator wall, my rifle hanging loose in my grip. The black tendril that had been cut off by the closing doors had left a puddle of dark fluid that continued to bubble and hiss as it ate into the metal floor. I kept my boots well away from it. 10, 9, 8. What the hell was that thing? Not human, not animal. Something else entirely. Something ancient that had been waiting behind that door for God knew how long. And we'd been sent to feed it, like cattle to slaughter. Tyler's face flashed through my mind. My son, barely 20, ready to throw his life away for the same flag that had just cost me my entire team. The same government that had lied to me for 26 years, that had turned my service into a joke, my loyalty into a weapon against my own people. The elevator slowed as it approached ground level. I tightened my grip on my rifle and stood up straight, not knowing what waited for me when those doors opened. The digital display finally showed 0, and with a soft chime, the doors slid apart. Helena Vance stood in the corridor, flanked by 6 men in tactical gear with weapons at the ready. Her face showed no surprise at my appearance, blood-spattered, alone, the only one returning from a team of 8. "Major Sullivan," she said, her voice as cool and clinical as when she'd first greeted us. "Congratulations on surviving the test." I stared at her, the words not making sense at first. "Test? My team was dead. Casey, Rex, Mickey, Dante, Wade, all torn apart, consumed by something that defied explanation. "Where's the rest of your team, Major?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "Dead," I said, my voice cracking. "They're all dead." She nodded slightly, as if confirming data on a spreadsheet. "That's unfortunate, but not unexpected." The security team kept their weapons trained on me as I stepped out of the elevator. One of them moved forward to take my rifle, but I tightened my grip. "What do you mean, test?" I asked, my voice steadier now, anger building beneath the shock. "What the hell was that thing, and why did you send us down there?" Helena adjusted her glasses, looking at me like I was a lab specimen. "The entity, as we classify it, has been contained in that chamber since the facility was established. We've been studying its capabilities and limitations. Your team provided valuable data on its response to armed military personnel." The implications hit me like a physical blow. You knew what was down there. You sent us in as, what? Bait? "Test subjects," she corrected. "Previous civilian teams yielded limited data. We needed to observe the entity's behavior against trained combatants." My vision went red. Wade, Dante, Casey, Rex, Mickey, all dead because this woman wanted to collect data. I lunged forward, dropping my rifle and reaching for Helena's throat. "You killed them! You murdered my team!" I never reached her. 2 security guards grabbed my arms, wrenching them behind my back with practiced efficiency. A third drove his knee into the back of my leg, forcing me to the ground. My cheek pressed against the cold floor as they secured my wrists with zip ties. "Major Sullivan, control yourself," Helena said, looking down at me. "Your reaction is unnecessary. The mission was approved at the highest levels." I struggled against the restraints, earning only a tighter grip from the guards. "You sent us down there to die." "Not all of you, clearly," she replied, gesturing to one of the guards. "Take Major Sullivan to debriefing room 3. General Crane will want to speak with him." The guards hauled me to my feet. One of them collected my rifle, while the others marched me down the corridor. I caught one last glimpse of Helena making notes on a tablet, probably recording my emotional response for her data. They led me through a series of hallways I hadn't seen before, away from the main research area. No one spoke. My mind raced with questions, with rage, with the fresh memory of watching my team die one by one. After several minutes, we reached a door marked DR3. One guard swiped a key card, and they pushed me inside. The debriefing room was small and sterile. White walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and 2 chairs. A camera in the corner tracked my movement. The guards cut the zip ties, pushed me into one of the chairs, and left without a word. The door locked behind them with an audible click. I sat alone for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a cold, focused anger. I examined the room for anything I could use, any way out, but found nothing. When the door finally opened again, General Howard Crane walked in. His silver-white hair was cut in a traditional military style, and rows of service medals decorated his chest. I recognized him immediately and stood at attention out of ingrained habit. "At ease, Major," he said, closing the door behind him. "Sit down." I remained standing. "Sir, with all due respect, I want to know what happened to my team." Crane sighed and took the seat across from me. "Sit down, Major Sullivan. That's an order." I sat, my jaw clenched tight. "I understand you're upset," he began. "Upset?" I interrupted. "My entire team was slaughtered. We were sent in blind against something that shouldn't exist, and I just found out it was deliberate." Crane's expression didn't change. "What you encountered today is classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people in our government know about the entity's existence." "What is it?" I demanded. "We don't know," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "In 1962, a mining operation discovered that door. When our scientists arrived to investigate, they found it was made of an unknown metal with properties that defy our current understanding of physics." He folded his hands on the table. "When we finally managed to open it in 1965, we discovered what you encountered today. We established this facility to contain and study it." "Study it by feeding it people?" I asked, disgust clear in my voice. "By learning its capabilities and limitations," he corrected. "Every team we send in provides more data." "Every team?" I repeated. "How many have there been?" "Yours was the 17th, he said without hesitation. and you're only the third person to return alive. The number hit me like a physical blow. 16 teams before us. Over 100 people sent to their deaths. This is murder, I said quietly. This is national security, Crane countered. And what happens to you now depends on your cooperation. And if I talk about what happened here, Crane's expression hardened. Everything you've seen is classified. Disclosure means life imprisonment, or you'd simply disappear. He paused. But I don't think it will come to that. You're a patriot, Major Sullivan. You understand the need for secrecy. Then he leaned back, studying me with cold calculation. There's one more thing, Major. Your father, Staff Sergeant William Sullivan. He died in a classified operation in Central America in 1983. I looked up sharply. I'd been told my father died in a helicopter crash during a routine transport mission when I was 7. He was part of the first team we sent into that chamber, Crane said quietly. Team number 1. He was the only survivor. The room seemed to spin around me. My father, the man whose memory had driven me to enlist, whose service record I'd tried to live up to my entire career, had been through the same hell I'd just escaped. You're lying, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. The nightmares he suffered afterward, the drinking, the way he looked at you and your mother like he was seeing ghosts. That wasn't from a helicopter crash, Major. That was from surviving something that killed his entire team. Crane opened a file folder. We've been watching your family for 40 years, Major. Your father's psychological profile made him ideal for that first mission. Yours made you perfect for this one. And your son, Tyler, his recruitment questionnaire shows promise. The implication hit me like a sledgehammer. Stay away from my son. That depends on you, Major. Follow the rules, take your compensation, and Tyler lives a normal civilian life. Cause problems. He shrugged. Well, the military is always looking for young men with the right psychological makeup. After he left, I sat alone in the sterile room, and the full weight of what had happened settling over me. My team was dead. My father had been through the same nightmare 40 years ago, and now they were threatening Tyler. But I had survived for a reason, and I knew what I had to do. 3 days later, I was back in my apartment, supposedly on medical leave. They'd given me a generous compensation package and a new assignment far from Nevada. But that night, I began to write. Everything I could remember about the facility, the entity, the systematic murder of American soldiers. I created encrypted files with all my notes and hid them in different locations. If something happened to me, this information had to survive. The next morning I called Tyler. Son, I need to tell you something about military service, about our family, about choices that can't be undone. I spent 2 hours on that call, telling him everything I could without revealing classified details. When I finished, Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Dad, are you saying I shouldn't enlist? I'm saying you have other options, better options, and that some family traditions need to end. That evening, I sent an encrypted message to a journalist I'd met years ago, not revealing classified information, just asking for a meeting, because some secrets were too dangerous to keep buried. The entity in that chamber was patient. It had waited for thousands of years, learning from every team they sent. One day, it would find a way out. When that day came, the world deserved to be ready. And Tyler deserved to be far from the military when it happened. The cycle of Sullivan men dying for government lies ended with me.